This is the Angry Birds Bird Minute, sponsored by Angry Birds for their 15th anniversary, where we tell you all about a cool bird that may or may not be angry. This week's bird is the ruby-throated hummingbird. This small bird is only a few centimeters long and weighs less than an ounce. Nonetheless, they are able to migrate across the entire continent of North America, between their breeding grounds in the continent's eastern temperate regions and their wintering areas in Central America's more tropical climes. I was once on a boat in the Gulf of Mexico, the Florida coast a thin ribbon on the horizon, when a small, blurry object whizzed by my head. I was completely confused until it happened again and again. Eventually, I realized that these were ruby-throated hummingbirds. The tiny creatures had crossed the entire Gulf in one single flight from Mexico. But are they angry? On a scale of 1 to angry, we rate the ruby-throated hummingbird as red in the face. This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And with us today is Joey Santore, host of the Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't YouTube show, which is YouTube's best show about plants in general, but also a show that's just got a totally different vibe from any other nature program I've ever seen. Joey, welcome to the pod.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us about your show a little bit. Describe it for people.
Well, it's, it's like, sometimes it's like 40-minute long videos of a grown man yelling at the ground excitedly and at the same time cursing many aspects of modern American civilization and civilization in general. And, it's got a little bit of a cynical flavor, but it's a little bit of hopeful too. And I don't know. It's basically, I view plants through the lens of how they evolved and what else they're related to and what other life forms they have relationships with, how they behave in an ecosystem. So it's a little bit different from a lot of other plant-focused content.
How'd you get interested in plants?
It started, I think I was into geology first, which I just realized I had no idea how to like I'd see a road cut and I would see all these squiggly lines in the side of a road cut or in the side of a mountain. And I realized I had no idea what they represented or how they got there. And so I wanted to learn more. And then, I learned about the geologic time scale and that kind of set the base for everything. I learned all the landmarks in the geologic time scale, evolution of life, evolution of eukaryotic life, great oxygenation event, Cambrian explosion, all that. And then I got a job working for the railroad. And then when I was working for the railroad, I was living at the time, San Francisco was still somewhat affordable. And I was living with my girlfriend near Golden Gate Park. And, I had lived in California on and off for 6 years. And I had no idea what a redwood tree was. Someone told me. And then I've always been an information hound. So I went to the library and read about them and learned they could live for 3,000 years and get really big. And that kind of blew my mind. So I tried to grow one. Just from a stump sprout, and it worked. And then from there, I was just hooked.
That's impressive. Love that journey of just learning. I like it's almost like a trail of breadcrumbs. Like you learn one thing and you're like, wait, there's more. And then you just like go all in and just like learn everything else there is to know about it. And that's,
it's like with anything, you can, especially in this, in this consumer society, you can fill your head with corporate logos and garbage advertising, or you can, escape from all that, learning about science and the living world. So, and I chose the latter, and, I've just been kind of following that. I learned about trees first. I was really into growing trees. Then I learned about taxonomy, is how different things are related, how they evolved, learned what the word monophyletic meant, and then just started learning about all these different evolutionary groups and just repeatedly having my mind blown, learning about them. And man, it was just, it's just been like that ever since. I mean, it's a full-on addiction now. And now I'm trying to learn about insects, and it never gets boring.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big insect fan myself. So it's a similar thing. I didn't think they were anything, special. I thought they were mostly annoying. And then it was when I took a class in college and I was like, do people know about this? Like, there's crazy diversity out there, and like all the evolutions in the different places they live, and so like that's just like a microcosm of just the experience of the natural world. I find of just getting so into it, and so for all you say you went and learned in more about plants and everything. Did you have one like you said you started to go to the library? Did you just keep going to the library? Did you reach out to other people? You know, where were you sourcing all your information?
Yeah, I mean, when I was getting into it, it was before smartphones. So, I mean, now you've got the library in your pocket, but back then you had to actually go to the library. Like, I'd have to go to the library to use the internet. Mm-hmm. I didn't have internet where I was living. And so it would become this thing. I'd actually like write down questions I had, because I was always thinking about this stuff. I'd write down questions I had, and then, and then just go to the library, look it up, and read about it. And then I was always kind of into textbooks too. Like I'd go to like the college, say after I'd go to like the nearby community college or whatever after the semester got out. And sometimes you'd find textbooks students had thrown out or whatever. And so I would get those and then just kind of start taking them apart. And I think, one of the textbooks I had first started with was an astronomy textbook. And I don't know anything about astronomy today. I don't study it, but I remember learning about spectroscopy and, putting light reflect off of a star or a planet, or light from a star or light reflected off a planet through a prism. And you could learn what the planet's atmosphere was made of, whatever. And I thought that was just so fascinating. I mean, it's like all science. Like the more you learn about it, you're kind of blown away that more people don't know about this or aren't excited about it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I think it's, for me, the thing that really strikes me today is just the disconnection that we have. I mean, the human species is what I think 2 million years old, and throughout the majority of that time, we've had a relationship with the other life forms around us, the plants, the animals. We've known what they were, and it's only recently, that we've been so disconnected from it. I mean, it's so many people just have no clue. I mean, the amount of people I meet that don't know that a flower produces a fruit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is mind blowing. And then, you use the word fruit and people think apples and oranges. Yeah, those are fruits, but fruit can be a dry capsule or a fucking, a resinous, like in sumacs, like a resinous little mesocarp that surrounds a seed. I mean, the disconnection is what startles me. And that disconnection, when you put two and two together, you later realize that disconnection is the reason why the living world is dying. And it is. That's just a fundamental truth. That's not negativity. That's not cynicism. It is dying. And more so, it's actively being killed, by our civilization. And I don't mean to go on some misanthropic rant either, because there is hope. There's a hope to this. Things don't need to be like this, but they're never going to get better unless we start educating people about it. I mean, you need a lot more than just educating people on what a fucking certain species of insect or plant is. You need, a reverence and a respect for those things. And so that's my starting point. But then I tend to go on fucking rants about it too, which I think is wholly appropriate,
Something interesting about your show to me is that you'll go to all these kind of remote places, like you've been around the world, it looks like, but also some of the videos that I've seen from you are like in a parking lot in, I don't know, on a layover or something. Like it seems like you're really good at finding, I guess plants are everywhere, so you're really good at finding something that's like pretty reliably interesting to talk about no matter where you are.
Yeah. I mean, well, plants are everywhere too, I mean, if you're in a city or in some, even some like suburban strip mall shithole, there's going to be plants there. I mean, there's going to be both the landscaping that gets planted, which is normally garbage, and then the quote weeds that pop up, which are normally in most disturbed landscapes. It's normally, primarily non-native invasive species, but then there's a handful of natives that can eke it out amongst the concrete and the asphalt and the constant human disturbance too. And for me, I used to never include that. Like I'd go to places and I would leave out, a road. I'd try to like not film the road or something. And at a certain point I stopped doing that. And I was just kind of realizing, why not include that? It's all part of this shit. I'm not trying to bullshit people into some idea of, a land that no longer exists, which is a land that's completely unimpeded by human fuckery. And so I started including it. And then I started, when I was working for the railroad with like, I'd be out, I would work jobs. Some of my favorite jobs to work were ones that you'd be out, you'd go actively, drop off boxcars at a loading dock or something, right? You'd go to a fucking loading dock, you drop off boxcars, work a midnight shift. And during that time, you'd be sitting at a switch, that you'd throw a switch, train, 10-car boxcar train goes into the loading dock. And while it's there fucking around, they're spotting them at the loading dock. You're out there waiting at the switch. And during that whole time, I'd be paying attention to what's growing out there. And I was, I'd be surprised. Again, it would be a mix of non-native invasive plants, and then a mixture of, horticultural escapees and then a few natives. And I thought it's this whole ecology that no one's paying attention to or studying, especially if it's in a sketchy area where there's, tweakers and, some tent cities and whatever. And so I thought that was always really fascinating. So that I started just, filming that too and trying to document that, because that is its own little unintentional ecosystem. And, a lot of people shit on invasive plants, and I'd certainly do that a lot too. But every invasive plant, generally speaking, except for a few that are created through human horticulture, every invasive plant is native somewhere, and many of our native plants in North America are extremely invasive in places like Europe.
I went to Hawaii for work a few years back. Hey fam, future Rhett here. Just coming in to say that I realize that I've told this same story 3 times in recent episodes, including maybe even something about a green anole recently. I promise I'll make it up to you shortly with a special episode containing 3 stories which have absolutely nothing to do with Hawaii. And that was something that I guess I should have expected, but it was kind of wild to me to see a bunch of plants that are native to Florida and lizards too. I saw green anoles there, and they're just totally invasive in this other place. It was like a weird reversal.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that there's so much misinformation about invasion biology, and there's so many people who deny it, especially in the permaculture community. No offense to them. Again, it's not all permies, but there's a lot of people that deny it. And it's, it doesn't need to be, I don't know what rubs them the wrong way if they've got kind of this rosy outlook on life, but it's not good or bad. It's all just about ecology and evolution in place. Native plants, it's not about some idea of ecological purity or going back to some, time period. It's about this plant behaves this way in this ecosystem because it evolved here. Not because some botanist with a master's degree decided this is not native. And it's because it evolved. You can tell it's got relationships with the soil. It's evolved certain adaptations to that specific climate. It's got relationships with the pollinators. There's specificist insects that use that plant and can't use any others. I mean, that's all it is. And I think it's that long-term, zoomed out outlook that we need to have, not just as individuals, but as a species, when looking at the life around us,
And I love what you were saying about, you're in the rail yards and there's small little plants, and that how, filming in a parking lot somewhere, just a back alley. Plants are everywhere. And so often we are, told, or the idea is that like nature is only something that like you have to go to like a national park to see, or you have to go to like a designated natural area to like watch natural life happen. But you don't. Within cities, on your block, on your sidewalk, there's going to be plants there, and they can tell you a story. And so you can sort of like you could go out into your backyard, even if you don't have a backyard. It makes it, I love introducing people to the idea that it can be more, nature is much more accessible than you think it is, and you can just go out and look at it if you really take the time to notice it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like this idea that, I don't even like the word nature. I call it I've started using just the word, the living world,
Mm-hmm.
but that this whole idea that it's far away, which is certainly what I had, growing up in Chicago, there's nothing cool to see. There's nothing diverse. Well, I was right at the time, but the reason that there was nothing cool to see and there was no diversity was because the culture that I was a part of, that I grew up in, had destroyed all of it. Everything was fucking, and we're all indoctrinated in this society to believe that, plants should look pretty. They should either, serve a purpose of some kind, either edible or medicinal, or they look pretty. Well, that's all garbage. The whole living world, just by existing, is serving a function. The ecosystem is a living machine, and our species, especially this civilization and our idiocy, this specific culture, is dismantling it, just like a fucking tweaker, trying to do work on a car, like taking tubes and pipes out and throwing shit around, throwing it in the garbage without understanding what it does. It's like, just imagine and I've seen this a lot, especially when I used to live on the West Coast. Imagine a tweaker with like the hood cracked open on a fucking Chevy or something, just going in there and just cutting wires and shit. And just, it's like, before, there's so much of this stuff has not even been studied yet. These relationships have not been studied. There's so much we don't know. There's a whole class of fungi that we weren't even able to study, the glomeromycetes, until, 20, 30 years ago, and we could sequence their DNA. And they form, symbiotic relationships with 80% of plant life. And we know so little about it. It's fucking insane the way that we're behaving. And again, I think a lot of the reasons a lot of that shit flies is because people don't know. They don't know. They think cows and feral cats are, quote, nature. They don't know the whole concept of a native plant, is so foreign to a lot of people. Like, I was in Brazil last year, and I was astounded to find out that the dominant culture there's like no books on a lot of the native plants. And you go to like, where I was in, like, I think, where was I? I was in Rio. You go to like a bookstore and there's no, like you go to like shitty Barnes and Noble in the United States or something. They've got like a nature section. You could find maybe like a field guide. There was nothing like that. Went to a few bookstores in Brazil. And then I would talk to native Brazilians and they were like, yeah, no one really has any interest in these plants aside from people at universities. It was mind blowing. I couldn't believe it. You got the coolest shit down here, man. Like mind-blowing, habitats, and there's just so little awareness. So it's not just a U.S. problem; it's everywhere. But my hope is, in movements like the native plant movement, kill your lawn and all that stuff. So it's a way to really put it in front of your face, so you could just see it in your front yard and start this. So it's about humans forming that relationship with the native life around them.
You made a whole show called "Kill Your Lawn."
Yeah. It was like a small scale TV show on this cable channel that's probably going to go out of business in a year or two. So, it was fun. It was like a nice temporary job. And I got to meet a lot of cool people, and I filmed it with one of my close friends, Al Scorch. And, but they were going to stream it, but they ended up putting it only on cable. So somebody ended up pirating it and put it on YouTube. It's the only way most people have been able to watch it, because the cable network, I don't know what they were thinking. They made it pretty inaccessible.
I tried to find it and I couldn't, so that makes sense. What was an episode like?
Well, it was kind of filmed in like the format of an unscripted TV show, like an unscripted reality TV show. And it was filmed by this small production company, and I'm friends with them. They're good people. And they're the ones that filmed it and produced, sold it to this cable company called EarthX. But it was like it's not the show I would have made. It's much different from Crime Pays. I gotcha. In some ways, it's nicer. There's like good drone footage queued up with music and whatever. But it's not the show I would have personally made if I was in the editing room. But I think it's more digestible for a more mainstream audience. So take from that what you may, I guess.
Sure. Crime Pays is cool because it's a lot of the time I've never seen a selfie show, for lack of a better word, that's so engaging before. Like, you do such a good job. It's just literally, it's almost like being a video game character a lot of the time, with having you walk around from your point of view looking at all these plants and pointing at them mostly. But it's like I know you do other shots than that, but just from like like a filmmaker perspective, I don't know, it's really neat. I've never seen anyone do anything like that for a nature show before.
Yeah, I used to never put my face in there because it was kind of, I liked keeping a low profile, and I just thought it was irrelevant. I've done it a little bit more now just because I think sometimes it's nice for people to be able to, I don't know, have like a connection to whoever the fuck is filming the thing. But,
Sure.
you know, even when I do it now, it's a very small part of, because it's not about me. It's about the plants. I don't want it to be about me. I don't give a fuck about any of that. I don't need that. It's about the plants, and it's about education. And, you know, I always try to mention, I mean, I'm really big into taxonomy and systematics. I'm always trying to put what family a plant is in when I mention it, because I think everybody should be asking that anyway. Because when you do that, you start to notice similarities between plants that are all in the same family, which then enables you to go to like a new continent or a new state or whatever and see a plant you've never seen before and say, oh, this is in this genus, or oh, I can tell this is in the carrot family, or I can tell this is a milkweed. It's just a species I've never seen before. You know, so that's why I do that. And then I always just like, I mean, when I'm in these places, man, that's my antidote to, you know, all the terrible places I hate being, like in a strip mall or stuck in traffic or in an airport. So when I'm in there, I'm like fully keyed in. I'm like just paying attention to everything, what geology it's growing on, what other insects are there. I'm so fascinated. I mean, there's so many questions to ask. Like I never get bored. Like having the context that I have for a lot of these places and these plants now, it's so hard for me to get bored, and it's so hard for me to spend less than, you know, a few hours in a place.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's like with anything, the more context you have, the more interesting it becomes.
100%.
What's the coolest ecosystem you've been to?
God, Minas Gerais, Brazil, the Campos rupestres, those habitats are incredible. They're underprotected. They're undervalued. They're understudied. There's a lot of cool botanists in Brazil doing work down there, but there's still so much left. I mean, you would see cacti growing on these thin-soiled rocky outcrops composed of quartzite, you know, metamorphosed sandstone that are, you know, almost 1 billion years old. And you'd see the cacti growing with cool bromeliads and orchids and these weird resurrection plants in the genus Valosia that produce these gorgeous flowers. I mean, they're crazy when they're called resurrection plants because they can completely dry out but not die, which is very rare for a flowering plant. Most of the plants that do that are ferns or mosses, you know, but here's a plant that can completely dry out. It looks crispy, it looks brown, it looks dead, but then it gets water and it comes back to life. And then it produces this flower. It's a monocotyledon. So it produces a flower. It looks like a fucking iris or a lily or something. I mean, they're just so fucking cool. I mean, it's a huge clade down there. It's a huge group of plants. There's many species. I mean, Minas Gerais is just one of those places where it's immediately overwhelming to be there. You're like, I'm like about to like fall over because there's just too much cool shit and I can't get all of it. And I'm taking pictures of everything and I've got so many questions to ask. And at the same time, there's not much information there. And when you do search for it, you've got to, you know, search in Portuguese because it's Brazil. So yeah, that was really cool. I always like dry habitats better because you see the most interesting evolutionary things evolve. I mean, you've got a plant growing where it should not be able to grow. And so whatever does evolve to grow there is going to have some pretty crazy adaptations. You know, and so it's dry habitats, deserts, and then tropical dry forests. You know, like a lot of places in the tropics, both north and south hemisphere, have a dry season. They've got a pronounced wet season where it's not a desert at all. If you're there in the wet season, it's very lush and green, but then it stops raining in the winter. And winter's only demarcated by a change in day length. It's still fucking hot.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got these dry winters, and it's all because of the tilt of the earth and where the earth is around the sun. But it's really, really cool. I think those tropical dry forests and dry habitats are remarkable. So yeah, Brazil was pretty cool. South Africa was just totally overwhelming too. I mean, so much diversity. You know, the things speciate readily. Like one species will have a congener, a related species in the same genus, just on the other hill. You know, and you're like, how the fuck? Like, why is this? Why is it? It's a kind of a mystery. Like, why is South Africa so biodiverse and rich? You know, is it because it's so stressful? Because there's it's Mediterranean style climate with fucked up substrate. You know, it's got quartzite too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Probably though. I mean, I could go on, man. You're gonna have to stop me.
Do it, man. That's why we got you on here. This is cool stuff. The thing about the dry climates having interesting plants is something I've thought a lot about, because it seems like where there's really good growing conditions, and I'm definitely not hating on rainforests or anything, there's crazy stuff there, but it seems like when there's really good growing conditions, a lot of plant solutions to everything is just to grow more. You know, they're getting predated, just grow more. Whereas you get into scrub in Florida would be the equivalent, or like deserts or all these other places, and they have to kind of come up with something else to do that there's just a lot of the time radically different from other approaches that you'd even think of.
It's wild. Yeah, they come up with armed defense. They come up with toxic chemicals, and probably the most interesting is they some of them evolve the ability to hide, and they do it remarkably well. You get this with Atrichoceros platyphila, which is related to chicory. It's in the sunflower family. It grows in the Mojave Desert. It's known as the gravel ghost because the leaves are speckled like the pebbly granite that it grows on, or pebbly rhyolite sometimes. You know, it's all just, you know, you see something like that and you're like, oh my God, how does the plant know? The plant doesn't know. It's a classic case of natural selection. It's
right.
You've seen what human beings can do with creating poodles and pugs from wolves, you know, or you know, broccoli and cauliflower from the same species of brassica. Imagine and they've done that, and humans have done that in a few thousand years. Imagine what the environment can do via natural selection in a few million. It becomes a lot easier to imagine, you know. So,
sure.
But you know, even the dry climates. I mean, if I'm on the East Coast, I'm looking for the dry places. I'm looking for the rocky outcrops and the glades and the fucking, you know, the sand deserts. I was just in a really cool sand plains. Like I was just in a really cool sand plain in Missouri, near Cape Girardeau, and it was all formed by, it was relatively large grain sand. It wasn't fine sand like you'd see at the beach. It was large grain sand. It was deposited by an ancient Mississippi River. The Mississippi River used to flow through there, and it was probably a certain bend in the river, and it just dropped its load right there. And, you know, today the Mississippi River is like 10 miles to the east, but the Mississippi River created this sandy habitat, and because of that, you get a remarkably different flora, the cast of plant species, than you get on the woodland, you know, like 30 miles to the west. It's fucking cool. And it was it was a really cool plant there in Polygonaceae in the buckwheat family. God, I can't fucking think of it now. This has been happening to me lately, man. There's too much information. My bandwidth is all fucking used though. I just filmed a video on it like 3 months ago. But, you know, but it looks like a juniper almost. It's a flowering plant. It's not a conifer. The leaves look like a juniper, and it's got these beautiful white flowers that come out of it. And it's just highly adapted to the conditions of growing on sand, which are, it gets hot as fuck and it drains fast. And it's relatively barren, so there's no vegetation covering the ground and preventing it from baking. And, you know, that's why it's evolved leaves like a juniper. It doesn't have big, broad leaves that are going to transpire a lot of moisture. It's got scale-like leaves that retain moisture and photosynthetic stems. And it's, you know, and it only grows on sand. I mean, it's an obligate sand plant. So, you know, it's stuff like that. I see that, and I think of how it evolved. It's so fucking cool and fascinating, and that's why I'm always drawn to the drier areas. So I learned botany in deserts and Mediterranean climates and stuff, and so I've just I stick with what I know.
And because you've been, as you said, all over and seen all these different habitats, do you pick new places to go to where you're like, I really want to explore this region, and so I'm going to go there, and, you know, look at all these cool plants there that I know? Or you're like, I just happen to be here for a separate reason, and I might as well make videos about the plants while I'm there?
Yeah, most of the time it's like if I travel and actually flying out of the country, I'm going to a location for, I know, you know, I've got a list of 30 species already that I'm looking for and want to see and get good photos of. But I mean, I'm doing this everywhere. I mean, half the videos I make, I don't even plan. They're just, I'm out looking at stuff and I don't even intend to plan to video it, but then I'm out there and everything's just so damn cool. I decide, fuck it, I'm going to start recording. So, you know, and I've done that in nurseries too. Like I go to visit a nursery, someone's like, come visit the nursery. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's a native plant nursery. It's our carnivorous plant nursery. And what they're doing is just so good. And they're so good at growing something that I'll film it. You know, it's, yeah. And then there's other things that I actually plan and like, okay, this is the target. I want to go do this, you know, so it all depends.
And where did you come up? Because the name Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't is such a fantastic name. And it's so, just as a great encapsulation. And first of all, how did you think of the name? And did you set out, like, did you think of the name first? And then we're like, okay, now we're going to like share, because you know, you're just learning all this knowledge and you're like, I need to share it, so I'm going to think of a name. Or you just started sharing it and then the name sort of like came up organically. Or a secret third option of something different and serendipitous.
No, I was already doing it. I started just originally filming things in Instagram stories and they would disappear. And then people said, oh, this is really good stuff you're sharing. And some of these plants are pretty threatened. You should make them available because, you know, Instagram just deletes photos in a day. So I just started doing that, and I forget what my like original names had been, but then it just kind of struck me one day. I was like, yeah, you know, I was kind of like cynical. I mean, the name has no doubt got a bit of salt in it. It's kind of a remark on, especially I feel it's so pertinent to American society, especially, you know, where we're so dumbed down, and education is so defunded. And, you know, the whole purpose of going to school is just to get a good job and get a career. And the passion of learning for learning's sake is, you know, nowhere is that really, I just feel like that's not a part of a lot of American society, you know, like, why do you want to learn that thing unless it's going to make you money, which is such a lowest common denominator, kind of pathetic outlook. And so I guess I was kind of bitter. And I was like, yeah, crime will pay. But, you know, botany doesn't, because our society doesn't value science. And unfortunately, it's only become more true. But, you know, I don't know. And then, I was kind of like a petty criminalist when I was younger. I was, you know, stealing shit, doing graffiti, just whatever, just degenerate shit. I mean, it was ethical within bounds, but I never did anything that I would like regret. But it was, you know, I definitely spent a little bit of time in the can, you know, just overnight, you know, never got formally convicted, but it was, I guess it was kind of born out of that. So, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of came to me. I forget when I exactly thought of it or where, but I just started putting that in, and that became the name, you know? So now it's pretty fitting, I guess.
It just so perfectly matches the show and the whole vibe of the thing.
I was perusing your website earlier, which is great. There's so much stuff. People will link it in the show notes. People could go check it out. But you're also an artist, and you have a book as well. And so did the art come first, or did the plants come first? Like, were they sort of, you're like, this is so, love all this stuff, I just want to make art out of it? Or was it like a kind of a separate hobby that just sort of like happened to intersect?
Well, I've always been drawing since I was a kid, and then, you know, I used to do graffiti, but that's just stupid shit. That's just, you know, messing around with letters, taking a form that you already know, a shape that you already know, and putting little ornamentations on it and kind of bending it around. It's good for some things, like for learning your own style. But you know, I was always drawing, but I used to draw. When I get into actually drawing pictures, I must have been like 20, 21. You know, I was just doing it with an ink and a brush. A friend got me into it, kind of showed me that you could do things that way. And I realized I could get a thin line or a fatter line depending on how much pressure I put on the brush. And then I would get paper out of the garbage, actually, from this dumpster where there was a framing store. And so I would get high quality paper scraps and mat board and shit and draw on that. And you know, when I initially started doing it, I was drawing things that I hated. Like I would draw advertisements. I'd take stock photos from advertisements of these, you know, these models with shit-eating grins, like, you know, the All-American Family. And it kind of was, I was inspired a lot by the art of this guy called Winston Smith, who designed a lot of the band The Dead Kennedys artwork in the 80s. It was like this really cynical, satirical, and also very dark criticisms of American society. And so I would draw that, but it was, it was kind of stuff that I didn't like the subject matter I was angry about, but I didn't really like to look at it. And then when I found, the living world and I found plants, then I sort of wanted to draw that. Like I go to these beautiful places in the Mojave Desert that I couldn't stop thinking about when I left them. And so I wanted to draw those. And so then I stopped drawing these fucked up figures from I found like ads in Life magazine, like the 1960s and 1950s Life magazines and Time magazines had a lot of fucking grotesque advertising in them, which was great for me, for the shit that I would do. So I stopped drawing that once I got into, looking at plants and going to the desert. And I started drawing the places that I liked being. And that was a lot more fulfilling because I would draw something that I actually wanted to look at,
Right.
And so I just started doing that. And, I was working for the railroad at the time. So I'd get off work and come home and draw. Or like if I was working second shift, I would, wake up, draw all day and then go to work. And it was, and have something to show for it. That was a nice thing about art. It was, it made me feel like I'd actually done something rather than just banged boxcars around all night or breathed in a bunch of diesel exhaust or whatever. So, and then I still do it. I mean, it's therapy for me. Like I draw now. I've been selling artwork here and there, but I draw stuff mostly just because it feels good to do it. And then I take a photo of it. And once I got the photo, I don't need the original anymore in most cases. So I'll sell it or give it to a friend or whatever. And it's definitely therapy. It's just something I do because it feels good. I probably couldn't live without it. It's like playing music, so.
It seems like you had a kind of like a creative explosion and like a learning explosion, I guess, when you were working for the railways. Is that how you think about it? And if it is, like, what about it made that happen?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, it was really easy. I mean, rather than go to school for something that I liked, I dropped out after a year of community college, which I was never intending to get a degree anyway. I just wanted to live on food stamps and fucking, live a really bum life, but learn and make art. That's all I cared about. I didn't give a shit about getting a degree or any of that. I thought society was kind of a fucking joke. I was pretty angry. I mean, I've been pretty angry my whole life, philosophically at least. And anyway, so I got the railroad job and it was, I used that money to fund my own education and to make art and stuff. And so I think, life was really easy then because it was, just go to work, get off, and then come home and make art or read or do whatever. And then, especially at work, if, you're working for the railroad, a lot of times you have a lot of time to kill, and since they got inward facing cameras, you can't really be on your phone. And so I would just start bringing textbooks to work. I'd buy a textbook online, I'd bring it to work and read that, and just kind of hammer it in. And like I got like the plant systematics textbook and Raven's biology of plants and that felt good too. And so, yeah, it was, I had what free time I did have because I didn't have a kid and I didn't really have any obligations aside from work. It was, all I had to do was like go to work, come home, and I just fuck around and draw and, try to make decent use of my free time. So that was it. I've always had to like be focusing on something. It's just the way my mind works, I can't sit still.
No, you seem really driven. I mean, like honestly, watching your videos, like you know a lot more and a lot deeper about plants and geology than I got from going to college. I don't know about Io's experience, but I honestly, I learned more, not knocking out my classes or anything. They were pretty great, but I learned more from going on little trips and like hanging out with people who are into the same thing and just reading on my own about that stuff. It just seems like, I don't know where I'm going with this. You just seem like an extreme version of that. Like you really know your stuff.
Well, it was all, my education was all motivated by dopamine, I got like a dopamine shot out of learning about it. And it wasn't just, I don't know how some people do things without that dopamine. Like, I'm just going to go to school, even though it sucks, and study law so that I can get a fucking law degree and make money to buy a Porsche and a McMansion and all this stupid shit. like there's no joy in that. Like I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who actually enjoy studying something like law or fucking, but it's so hard for me to imagine. It looks like such an empty life. You know, and I'm sure there's people that do that with botany too, or any science. Like, I'm going to go get this degree, and I just, you know, but for me, it's always got to be fun. It's got to be fun. And I think that's part of it, especially now, like since I've been teaching, part of the problem, I think, with the whole education system is that it's based on memorization. It's not based necessarily on understanding something. You know, we want you to understand this. Fuck the test. Fuck being able to recite it perfectly. We want you to understand the simple concepts. And so, like, you know, I'm teaching this general botany class, and it's a general class. It's not science majors. And I was teaching photosynthesis, and, you know, I'm like a quarter into it, and I'm like, man, fuck this. Like, you guys don't need to know these equations. This is fucking pointless. Like, all you need to know is that, you know, a couple key things. You know, the water molecule is split before carbon is fixed. And then, you know, this is the base of the food chain, and plants enable everything. And, you know, there's only like a couple key things you need to, if you're not going further into science, but mostly it should be fun. Like, it should be exciting to learn about these things. Like, it's when you learn, like that feeling I get when I learn something new, where I'm like, no shit, I didn't know that. That's incredible. And it feels really good. Like, that's how learning should feel. It shouldn't feel monotonous and, you know, why are we learning this and all that? I mean, if someone's doesn't understand why they need to know something, it's your job as a teacher to show them how. Like, what context can this be put in where it's cool and fun and enjoyable to learn about, and also, you know, practical, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And I especially love the joy in it. Watching some of your videos, I'm sort of like, this is what it must be like for my friends to go on walks with me, because I'm like, this is that, this is that, this is that, just like as we go along. And because I'm like, the world is so cool and amazing, and there's so many interesting things out there, and it makes me so excited, and I want to share my excitement with you so you can enjoy it and like also experience this joy that's just like from existing in the world. And so, like, I think that's such an bringing the joy into the teaching is also like, people, if it's boring, people aren't going to want to learn about it, so you got to make it interesting for them to learn, but also like it's just interesting in general.
Yeah, that's kind of that's how I feel too. I mean, because I look at a lot of aspects of shit that other people are interested in, you know, like video games or nice cars or whatever, and I'm so fucking bored by it because there's just it's not my world. It's not anything I'm interested in. I don't get anything out of it. And so, you know, but I'm sure there's someone out there who could make it interesting for me in some way. But, you know, my job is to explain things in a way where people understand it and where they also see how cool it is. Because it is philosophically medicinal, I think. Learning about the living world fills a hole inside of me, you know, and that's something that I get, you know, when I see someone who's just, and this happens with like young men a lot, especially, but you'll see, you know, young men who are just trying to showboat. Sometimes I see this, we're just trying to showboat and talk about things and they don't seem interested in whether the people they're talking to are grasping what they're talking about and understanding it. And I just, when I see stuff like that, and you see old guys doing it too sometimes, whatever. It's generally men, though, that's for sure. But you know, there's like an ego thing in there, and it's like, man, it's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be about fun and explaining things and sharing knowledge and getting people excited about this stuff. And then also when you realize how fucked it is and how the living world is slowly dying, you know, it becomes all the more imperative to make sure people are getting generally excited about it and stoked on it and seeing how cool it is, you know, because that's part of what's going to save it, you know. And whatever your feelings may be or how much hope you do or do not have, that's certainly going to be required. People need to value something before they can, you know, care about it and try to nurture it and nurse it back to health.
People can't conserve what they don't care, and they can't care about what they don't understand. So like, you have to introduce the understanding so people can care, so then they can conserve. And if you want people to understand it, you have to present it in a way that they're actually going to learn and like retain it. Yeah. But you know, at the same time, like, I get really tired of the anthropocentrism on plants sometimes. Like, oh, what's it do? Is it medicinal? Can you eat it?
I'm more tolerant of it now than I am, but I definitely, when people say that, I try to kind of use that as a way to get them in the door to having a more grandiose and fucking, I don't want to say holistic, but broader outlook and even paradigm shift on what these living things do. It's not just, can I put it in my mouth and not die? Or, is it going to get me high? Or is it medicinal for some, imagined ailment that I may or may not have? It's, what does it do? What does it do in the ecosystem? How did it evolve? What is it related to? How is it adapted to the specific set of conditions in this region that it's evolved in over the last, 10,000, 100,000 years, et cetera? That I think is the more, that's the stuff that really gets me going and gives me a greater context, because now you're thinking about, time spans that are beyond, exponentially beyond your own lifespan. And you get a little bit more of a clue of an origin story of how everything around you currently came into being, and I think if society as a whole, if we gained that kind of education, in elementary school, like if they taught geologic timescale in elementary school and natural selection, even just threw it in there, like as much as you could explain it to someone who's in third grade, society would probably be better off. I mean, this is all shit Carl Sagan said, all for like science, basic scientific education for the masses. I mean, because then, people grow up and get in positions of power, or even if it's just city government or whatever, and at least they have a basis of understanding of the world around them, and that they're not just so myopic in terms of the world that they know.
I was listening to your podcast episode with Doug Tallamy the other day, and the thing I really like about what he does is that he has so you bring people up, they understand what's going on, and then there's like a next step, which is like, what do I do? We don't have a good answer for that usually. The things that nonprofits say are like, donate to us. The things that the government says is usually pretty small scale. Like it's usually like, how do you, like turn off the lights when you go out of the room kind of things. And the thing I like about Dr. Tallamy's stuff is that he gives people something they can do that actually matters. And that's something that's only in their power to do. Like no one else can kill your lawn.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's crazy. Like it is. It's something you can do immediately to improve the life around you. You can create an oasis for life. And in doing that, you can also educate yourself, because you're going to have all this stuff around you, all these life forms around you that, you plant this shit, everything starts showing up. Like all the cool native insects, the native lizards that keep down the cockroaches, and the birds that keep down the pest insects. You start to really see how connected everything is. And you also start to see where we kind of fucked up as a society, like the lawn really is an issue, man. It's a fucking cultural disease. It's so damaging, and I don't know, man. I think it's so important, and yeah, it is. It's something that you can easily do in your own front yard to change the world around you, rather than just bitching online about it, or leaving a shitty comment, or fighting with some. What I mean? It's like it's so positive. So I've been definitely hyping that too. Yeah, with Doug, it's funny because I was surprised he came on. He and I, as you know, have very different MOs and very different audiences. We've got the same MO, but we've got different mannerisms of going about it. And, but, he probably held his nose and came on my podcast, and we came together for a cause. Cause he's great, but he's very wholesome and clean. And I curse a lot. And he didn't even like the term kill your lawn. He's like, we shouldn't use that. That's too aggressive. Okay. Well, you've got your audience. I've got mine, pal. We're coming together for the common good.
Yeah.
What do people do after that? So for someone who's listening to this, who hears that and they don't know very much, what is the point of that? Why do they kill their lawn?
Well, because it's in killing your lawn. Your lawn is a desert, right? There's all these life forms that were around you before your house was there, that were around your region and your neighborhood before your house was there. And many of them are directly beneficial, not just to the landscape and the ecology, but to you as well. And so when you recreate that habitat that was there for thousands of years before your house was, but you make it look trimmed up and nice, and you put in a little path and a spot to chill. Well, as we say this, I'm getting home, and like the chromalina in my front yard is just lit up with purple flowers and covered in butterflies. But anyway, when you do that, you're creating a haven for life. You're nurturing the living world around you, and it's not only better for the health of the landscape, but it's better for your own mental and emotional health too. I mean, there's hundreds of studies out there on this, but we don't need them. We don't need those studies to, show us how much being around green living things improves the human quality of life, and mental health, etc. So those are a couple of the reasons as to why it's worth doing. And also it's just, you're creating a pleasant spot for yourself to hang out. And it's, I think, the benefits of doing something like that versus just like hanging out inside watching Netflix after work or something. Right? And I'm not knocking that, I'm sure everyone's got to do that once in a while, but going outside and actually spending time and looking at things and observing and learning, it's good for you physically, but it's also good for you mentally. It's good mental exercise. You're observing things around you. I mean, my yard where I live now I learned so much about the native landscape, much of which has been destroyed, by just hanging out in my yard and seeing what comes through. Like right now I'm looking at like 10 fucking monarch butterflies that are headed south towards the forests of Michoacan, for the season. I mean, there's so much good that comes out of it. So, but it's like I said, it takes a little patience and it takes a little charisma in terms of talking to your neighbors and explaining what you're doing, and letting them know like, hey, this is intentional. There is a plan here. I didn't just let my yard go, et cetera, and also just keeping it from, you have to hedge things up a little bit. You got to like make it look kind of nice, which is something that Doug Talmy is always talking about, which I think is really good. You got to there's got to be a method to the madness.
Well, I think that's a good spot to end on. Do you have anything you want to plug?
No, I mean, I got the drawing book out, and I've got 2 more books coming out. One is not set to be published till February 2026, but that's going to be, it's like 400 pages of plant porn, basically, of plants from all over the world, and explanations on, their ecology and how they evolved. And it should be really good. I mean, it's basically everything I've been doing, on videos, but compiled into a book with numerous photos of each species. So, and it's like 400 pages, but maybe it's 300. I forget how anyway, it wasn't enough. I could have made like 1,000-page tome, there's there's so much cool stuff out there I want to show people. I've got photos of all of it. So, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just doing that. And then if people want to watch Kill Your Lawn, someone did pirate it and put it up on YouTube, which I think is pretty hilarious. And, I don't know. I'm just going to be doing my thing till it sucks or I can't live off it anymore. And I'm just here and enjoying life and looking at the world, the living world. So.
Sure. And Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't is on YouTube and podcast platforms. Yeah.
I got the podcast. I got the Instagram page. There's some company set up a Facebook page for me. And so I'm on Facebook too.
All right, man. Well, thanks for calling in.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the pod. This has been such a joy to chat back and forth and hear about your perspective on everything. And hope all good stuff for you, hopefully, in the future.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you guys a lot for the opportunity. Take care.
All right, have a good evening.
Okay, see ya. Bye.